Namaste. Currently, Mercury is retrograde. So, the season is of retrograde Mercury. And that takes me back in the past. Because that is how it happens. When Mercury is retrograde, many things in the past you tend to revisit. So, I am also going to share the interview that I gave to a person based in New Zealand. And in this interview, I have answered many questions based on black magic, Guru Chandal Yoga, and I have cleared many misconceptions in astrology. Since the interview is of 1 hour, around 58 minutes or so, I am going to publish it in parts so that you don't have to go through an entire 60 minutes interview. Certain topics on which I have answered, based on that, you will see different episodes of this interview. So it will be a series of around 6 podcasts. It happened so that the person, she read my book, How to Overcome Rahu, which is also a best-selling book. And after reading the book, she liked it so much, she wanted to take interview. And in that interview, she asked many good questions. And that is the reason that I want to share this entire series, because in this series, I have answered on many topics which can give you a new insight, a fresh perspective, and clear all the misconceptions that you have been carrying all along. So on this note, let's begin with this series. This is the first episode, and there will be 5 more coming. So let's begin.
Going back a little bit to your first answer, you say that the purpose of the book as well was understanding the true nature of Rahu. So in your words, and for my listeners, what is the true nature of Rahu?
True nature of Rahu is something that can vary from person to person. What I perceive Rahu as can be different from what the other person perceive Rahu as. What I have mentioned in my book is my perception about Rahu and how you can overcome Rahu by understanding the significance of meditation.
Okay, the significance of meditation. And I like the whole premise that the entire book is laid upon, which is you need to overcome Rahu. It's something that you need to kind of survive or superate or overcome. Very, very interesting title. Why that title? Why How to Overcome Rahu?
Because unless you overcome your desire, you cannot actually find peace. Rahu itself is the desire. Rahu drives you into more having, it makes you more desirous.
Mm-hmm. You actually say in your book that is the solid reason why we reincarnate. That's what you say in your book. Is the reason why we reincarnate, Rahu. Is that true?
No, can you repeat what I didn't?
Oh, sorry, that you say in your book that Rahu is the reason why we reincarnate and why we come back to this reality.
Yes,
why? Okay.
That is true. Because the whole human birth, the source of human birth is your desire. You are born because there is a desire that has to be fulfilled. This desire is what your Rahu is in your birth chart. So the birth and the rebirth cycle happens through desire, which is Rahu.
Okay. So one of the things that you say in your book as well is that there is actually no good position for Rahu. You describe Rahu as a demonic energy, and you give an explanation for it. This kind of really grabbed my attention. Can you describe for us why is Rahu a demonic energy? I understand the myth behind, but if you can repeat it, please, for us, and what is your personal perception about it?
The simple reason for this demonic or this kind of, which I have mentioned, is basically because Rahu brings ambition. Ambition drives you crazy, right? The more you become ambitious, the more you are running and running and running. Everybody knows what happened with Hitler or with any dictator. If you see, every dictator has been a demonic person or has eventually become demonic because of his unending ambition. This ambition is what Rahu brings. And because of this, you become demonic, or basically you lose your control and you just keep running.
Okay. And something that really grabbed my attention as well, kind of following that idea, is that you say that there is no good placement for Rahu. You talk about, Rahu in the 6th house and exalted and all of these, but literally, well, not literally, I'm paraphrasing, to say something like, oh, don't kid yourself. Let's not kid ourselves, and let's believe that there is a good placement for Rahu, because there is not. So can you explain more about that? That was like a very interesting perspective, that Rahu is not exalted in 6th house.
So when I mentioned this, I mentioned it from a spiritual perspective for a spiritual person, because as long as there is desire, you are still in the grip of this worldly affairs. The transition from desire to desirelessness, which is Ketu, just to make it more clear, Bhagwan Raman Maharshi has specifically mentioned that Maya is desire, or to put it, illusion. Desire is an illusion, and God is desirelessness. So the transition from Rahu to Ketu, and that is what I have mentioned in the book, that the whole cycle of birth and rebirth happens through this Rahu and Ketu. As long as you are having certain desires, you will continue to be in the circle of Rahu. That is why any saint or any enlightened being is in the state of desirelessness. That is Ketu. So when I mentioned that Rahu is, in reality, Rahu has no place or no good place in the horoscope. It is more for a person who is meditating or who is on the spiritual path.
Okay.
For a person who is still at the base level, where he still is desiring certain things, It can be power, it can be pleasures, it can be anything. For such a person, then we can give certain houses where Rahu can do well. But that is on a different level. I have written on a level which is related to spiritual path. That for a person on a spiritual path, for him, Rahu anywhere is not there is no specific place where you can say that this place is good for Rahu. For somebody who is on the spiritual path.
Okay. I did notice that. You talk about Ketu in very favorable and very good terms, but because you are analyzing Ketu from the spiritual perspective, and that's actually something that you say that is the favorite of people who is in the lightening or who is in the spiritual path. So that's very interesting. And you also say that if Rahu causes any trouble, is the trouble of our own making. That's very interesting. And we should not blame Rahu. We should not blame the planets. Would you talk about that?
Yes, because Rahu or Ketu, these are the entities that we have identified as. But whatever actions you do, whatever like the nature of clinging, the nature of attachment, the nature that I want more and more and more, the feeling of being dissatisfied in spite of having everything that one could wish for. So all these things, that signifies the placement of Rahu.
Yes.
Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha.